Okay, so welcome everybody to the Business Bookcase interview with Andrew Boughen. Is that how you pronounce it?
It's Bourne, like
Bourne.
Born Again, yeah,
Born again. Oh, marvelous.
or Jason Bourne.
Who is the author of our August book of the month, which is called A Life's Work: How to Find Meaningful Value in Everyday Work, and it's really about value. In a whole bunch of different ways. So the first thing I'm going to ask you, Andrew, first, thank you, welcome, and thank you for
Thank you for
giving up
having
your
me.
time to talk to the audience here.
Yeah.
Um, First thing I'm going to ask you is how you came upon value as something that you were interested in, and in terms of your career, your journey through life and your career, and what led you to the point where you wanted to explore that and write the book, and why now? Lots of questions all in one. Sorry.
Yes. Thank you. And yeah, I guess rather than start at the beginning, it may be worth starting with a what I call a sort of epiphany moment that I had when I found myself studying how to value a bond in a business lecture in a business school 20 or 25 years after I'd been an undergraduate in my late teens, doing a business studies degree, and then I'd worked in the city and in consulting and strategy, and then I found myself back in a lecture theatre, um, learning something that I'd learned before about how to value a bond, and I realized I was listening to the lecture with a very different set of thinkings and thoughts and worldview about this whole aspect of value. And what struck me from the lecture was the lecturer explained a formula it was put on the whiteboard of value, which is basically everything is fixed in valuing a bond apart from the risk factor. So I went to the lecturer at the coffee break and said, "Isn't it strange that you're valuing something based on the risk of losing it? Surely you value something on the basis of gaining it, not losing it." It seems a very negative view. And the lecturer said, "You don't understand." And I said, "Well, I do understand technically what you're saying, but actually emotionally, if I had £1 million to spend on bonds, I would want to buy bonds in something I believe in, something that I want my money to be invested in. So it would be in a rice pudding factory or Disney or something like that, which I love, rather than something like computer gaming or whatever, which there's nothing wrong with that, but it's just not my thing." And he said, "Yeah, but you don't understand. It's just about money. Nothing else matters." And I went away from that lecture thinking, well, but that it doesn't have to be that way. I mean, one of my favorite films is Disney, talking about Disney again, Disney's Enchanted, which is a story of a princess who gets thrown down a well and goes from storybook land, two-dimensional cartoon land, to modern day so-called real life New York. And she goes around, she believes in happy ever afters and true love's kiss and all of that. And she goes around, and what she encounters, it's so bizarre. And she meets Patrick McDreamy, the actor who's playing a lawyer, and he says. She says to him, "Well, you and Nancy, his fiance, you're going to have a happy ever after." And he says back to her, "I don't even know if I'll get through tomorrow. Never mind happy ever after. It's complicated." And she says back, "It doesn't have to be that way." And I love that phrase. And I think I felt like the princess in the lecture theatre saying to the lecturer, "It doesn't have to be that way." That value is so much more than just a number on a whiteboard.
Hmm.
So that starts to explain a little bit about my journey, I guess, to use that classic word. And the journey started in the 80s. I started in strategy consulting for banks with what was Coopers and Lightbrand in my day, in 1986, just at Big Bang. Greed is good, Gordon Gekko, and it was very much like that. I'm sure you're far too young to remember that those days, but it was very much champagne and driving a Ferrari through the city. And I guess looking back, having left that, studied theology for 3 years, been minister of a church for 20 years, but dealing with people all the time who had, a lot of them in the church did work in the city and work in business, but the value and the world that they inhabited and what they treasured and what was important was far more than just money. And yet the message they were getting from work was, well, yeah, you have to work hard, but we're going to pay you lots. And that sort of somehow money was just the only answer. So I guess I thought my 20-year-old self working in the 80s in the city, greed is good, had changed a lot over those 25 years, or 30 years, whatever it was, to the person who's now sitting in the lecture listening. So I started to just look at this whole topic, I guess, of what do we really value. And there's a quote from Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount where he says, where your treasure is, there your heart is also. So he's basically saying what you actually value is, I can tell you your heart by what you value. So if I got to know you and listened to you and what you really bothers you, what you're very anxious about losing, what you desire to gain, that shows the where your heart is placed. I guess the positioning, the leaning of your heart, and I just think it's a fascinating topic.
And so many dimensions, actually. And how you grow up from that undergraduate time to the person you are now, you have seen so much more of the world and so many different relationships, and so many things have happened to you, your friends, your colleagues, your family, and whilst at the same time as being really simple, it doesn't have to be that way. It's also not simple at all.
No.
Yeah, interesting, fascinating. So,
yes, and yet in some ways we've made it very binary. That a sort of, because I look at the difference between a soulless and a soulful organization, and I guess my conclusion when I did my research was the difference is how you see value. So a soulless answer, if I asked you what's the value of Apple, a soulless answer would be $3 trillion or whatever it is at the moment. But a soulful answer would be, well, Apple's enabling me to talk to you right now. And it helped me navigate my way to a meeting earlier on or whatever. So there's all sorts of value. And yet so actually, I think the sort of the simple answer is just to put a number on something. But the rich answer is, so I talk about sort of opening your eyes and the seeing the whole view. There's a whole world of value rather than just focusing on one number. Yeah, so it's far more, rather than simple versus complicated, I guess it's sort of single number versus rich and diverse, and just a whole world of treasure to enjoy. Yeah.
Yes. Rich and deep, and yeah. So the byline of the book, their life's work, how to find meaningful value in everyday work. Why do you think it's important to find meaningful value in everyday work?
Well, the origin of the book was I was commissioned by a a foundation to do research. So I left being a vicar, and I work in a business school now and have done for a few years, looking at this whole topic of value and values and soulful enterprise versus soulless enterprise. And so I was encouraged to start to write that down in book form. And then when talking to publishers, they said, "But yeah, but who are you writing for?" And so I thought, that's, yeah, good question. It's a fairly obvious question if you're writing a book. And I realized that I was writing it for a guy called Rowan, who's a guy I got to know, who is in his early 30s, quite successful in his job. But he basically, as I got to know him, he expressed how he just thought his job, he was an accountant, just was he thought it was a waste of time. That it didn't really have of meaning, and that I realized that he was part of a generation, and my children would be in the same generation, who've been told you've got to change the world, and you've got to work for a social enterprise. You know, you've got to be, you know, follow your dreams and follow your heart, and make the difference, be the difference, or all of that, and which are great ideas and being purpose driven. But I guess the problem with that, which has caused a lot of heartache in the people and the more people I spoke to about this, the more sort of heartache I was hearing. And the heartache is they feel they want to do that, and it's a very great idea, but don't know how to. And actually, I think the key is to say we change the world every single day in the small activities. You don't change, you can't move the world's axis by physical. No individual could do that, obviously. But we change the direction of people's lives by a conversation, and by the way that we act towards people. We can destroy people very easily in work, and I'm sure you know that. Not that you've done that, but I'm sure you've seen that happen. But we can also build people up, and yeah, I think it's a matter of help. So I talked to Rowan as I sort of was writing the book and getting his feedback, and other people as well. I realized that actually, when we see how our actions are impacting our customers and the people that we work with, and how they are making a difference in society, as we see that, then that's where we get the joy and the meaning from. So it doesn't come from sort of statements on the wall necessarily. It comes from making that much more concrete. So it comes back to, you know, looking at your treasure, looking at what you're actually investing in, what you're building in terms of your products, and that, you know, being an auditor, as Rowan is, he is giving confidence to investors about the numbers in terms of the accounts, but also he's giving huge amounts of advice to the client that he's speaking with, and lots of other aspects of value that he's adding. And when he saw that,
sorry, Andrew, I'm going to stop you there just for a moment because we are actually nearly at 15 minutes.
Right.
And we're running out of time, but there's so much to cover here. So
sorry,
I'm going to invite you back. It's fine. I'm going to invite you back for a part 2, and who knows, there might be a part 3, because I really want to dive into some of the aspects of your book and around this, in particular, the structure that you share. So I'm going to stop that now. Thank you so much for your time, and we will come back and do a part 2.
Brilliant. Thank you. I look forward to that.